Give me 1 second. Hope everybody's staying cool.
Oh,
Crazy
yeah.
heat wave. Jeez.
Very cool.
All right. All right, there we go.
Why I look like I'm blowing in the breeze because I have my fan on me.
Oh, I don't blame you. All right. We'll call the meeting to order here at 6 o'clock. It's a regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. My name is Mike Ergo, the first Selectman, with Nita Kincaid, Selectwoman, Bob Carlson, Selectman, Christine Dias, our admin finance for the town. And the first order on the agenda is any public comments on non-agenda items. We have on any of the agenda items that are on our agenda, we do allow public comment limited to 2 minutes on each item as we go through the agenda. But if there's anything not on the agenda that anyone felt the need to comment on, we're happy to take those comments. Not that we'll have any answers, but certainly happy to listen. If there are comments, you would raise your hand if you are on Zoom by hitting the raised hand function. And if you are on the phone, it is *9 to unmute yourself. Hearing and seeing no hands raised or comments being shouted at us, I would go into agenda item number 3. Hang on, I have to fix something on my screen here. Agenda item number 3, which is the rental proposals for the 1-story wing of the North Stonington Education Center, which is the old middle school. Just to give a little background before we get into it for anyone who is unfamiliar with the topic, as those, I'm sure most everyone knows, we just basically completed our renovation of our new middle high school and our new elementary school, with the old building not having an intended purpose at this time, with the exception of a portion being used by the Board of Education for administration and Board of Ed space. So kind of going into this, there had been in the initial phases of the reconstruction project, we thought the building may be demolished. Going through the project, there were unforeseen costs that continued to creep up. So it was looking more and more unlikely that the demo would actually be able to happen with the funds available. So our board of Selectmen put a committee together to look at potential uses for the building. That committee did some good hard work over a number of meetings, and in conjunction with the Wheeler Library, took a look and said, okay, what are some things that we would like to see there? And certainly in the spirit of the deed that exists on the building, to keep it to educational purposes was what was the most ideal scenario. So we put out an RFP, 2 RFPs, one for the potential rental of the 1-story wing, which is the old middle school, and one for the demolishing of that wing, to see what our options were. We did not include anything to do with the 2-story wing, not knowing with COVID-19 if there would be needs of the school. So keeping some space available for ourselves. So that has not been discussed or considered, is not up for discussion tonight. There were 2 proposals that came in with regards to the proposals for the rental of the space, and being that it was for educational purposes, it was pretty good that we actually were able to get proposals, because certainly there's not like a million educational facilities out there. Those proposals have been provided to the selectmen. I invited the town attorney just for this part of the conversation, for a couple of reasons. This has been something that has been discussed, certainly at length within the community. And I wanted to make sure if the selectmen had any questions about anything that they would be able to ask them of the attorney. I want to just also mention with these proposals, so there's two bidders who are bidding together. So they're not competing. They wish to occupy the space together. And so I do believe, I know at least one of them is on the line. If the selectmen had any questions, they'd be able to ask them. And I just want to preface my comments and then go to the attorney if he has anything to add. But with regards to any voting on this, I am going to be abstaining from the vote on this and will not vote on this at all because one of the bidders, I have a potential or a perceived conflict of interest. So I don't want to be put in that situation. And so just to be clear, if the selectmen choose to move forward with the proposal in any way on that, you'd both need to vote affirmatively on it. With that being said, the attorney did advise me that I could and should let you know that I do feel that these are good proposals that make a lot of sense, and that if the selectmen choose to move forward on these proposals, that I would advise that the best way to do this would be for me to designate one of the selectmen in conjunction with a member of the school repurposing committee to negotiate a lease on on the property. And so what I would like to do, if you do choose to do that, is ask Nita, and I've talked to Tula, and to have Gary and Nino involved. Nita's been involved in a lot of leases for the town in prior. I know she has the time to potentially do it. And Gary is well versed in in this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to look at it or not, but that is a long-winded answer, but I thought a lot of background was important for me to lay the groundwork. And the town attorney's here. I don't know if the selectmen want me to open it up for his comments first, or if you guys wanted to make comments first.
Bob, do you want to start? Honestly, I have a bunch of questions I ask too, so go ahead. No?
Hi, this is Town Attorney Rob Avina. Sorry, you kind of cut out on me a bit there. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
And
I'm actually up on the Cape, but I told Mike I would certainly jump into the meeting with pleasure to try to help everybody out here. This is an interesting opportunity, obviously, because, and I'll answer any questions you have. Certainly the use restriction, it's important that we have had a response from a school facility. That's good to know. And obviously what you're thinking about tonight is, do you want to go forward with the negotiations to firm up a lease agreement? I haven't had the opportunity to go through all the proposals, but I believe it sounds pretty sound. And some other towns we represent, I've done a couple of these now where the school buildings are being leased out to other school facilities. So we're certainly familiar with it. But I can, again, advising Mike, we do need to set up a separate way to go forward so that he is not in a conflict situation for negotiating the lease on behalf of the Board of Selectmen and for signing the ultimate lease document and, taking up the procedures from there. But I'll certainly take the questions from the board.
So if the board doesn't have any questions, then it's fine, but I wanted to make sure I made Rob available if you did have any. And it sounds like, Nita, you have a handful of questions, maybe on the lease or in general about anything. So you can certainly fire away and start.
Bob, do you want to go or I'll go?
You can start, Nita, and I have my questions, so you can start.
Yours is blank? Is that what you're saying? Well, I thought there were a number of things in here to me that were confusing. That's why I asked about, before we started, about the drawings here. It wasn't clear to me, are these, as for example, is the Exhibit A for the first group for just them? Or is it for the two groups together?
So the two proposals were completely separately submitted, but they note in their proposals that they would be working together. So the Exhibit A on page 3 for the 4-page one is just for that one, whereas the Exhibit A, that is on page, that says at the bottom, page 4 of 2, that one only goes with that contract, that proposal.
That only goes with, what did you just say? Only goes with what?
With that proposal, the longer one.
All right, so it's the, and I wish we could look at this, but it is using the part that connects to Exhibit A. Is that on the left-hand side? Is that what it is? I mean, it's very hard to compare these things.
So if you look at, can I say the names of the groups, Mike and Rob?
Yeah,
I'm talking
that's now part of the public record by
Okay.
putting those
So-
into the agenda.
On the Connecticut Coastal Academy's proposal, they are looking to use the part that's closest to the parking lot that goes through the cafeteria, whereas the Lighthouse Voc Ed Center is looking to use the next portion over as you get closer to the Board of Ed.
Okay, so when we look at the numbers and so forth, the numbers they each have put in has already been discussed between the two of them, or the idea of who's going to do what has already been communicated between the two of them, or?
So we would have 2 separate rental agreements with the 2 groups. They would have their own separate space. They've worked out with each other so that they're not trying and competing for the same space. They've worked out amongst themselves what they would be doing. But as far as the town is concerned, they are 2 separate tenants.
Okay. And then the question, so they have different ways that they're going to organize their time and all of that. One is very clear about how things are going to be on in the summer and all of those sorts of things. The other is not so clear.
I mean, as far as the town would be concerned, I think once we give them the space, it's up to them to use it for their educational purposes. And we, just like we go into the Center for Emergency Services once a year for an inspection, and the fire company comes and looks at the rec center. Other than that, we stay out of each other's spaces because we've leased that space. So we would be leasing this to them for their use.
The first one, I'll put this. They are planning on us doing some work for them in advance. Have we put the things down in terms of the numbers and looked at what we're going to have to spend here?
Are you, which proposal are you talking about, Nita?
One, the first.
I don't remember which one's the first one.
First one
The
was,
first one.
about
And the building the wall and a
it
few
was
things
Lighthouse.
like that. Are there, I mean, I didn't try to put them all together because some of them didn't have numbers with them and stuff like that. Has anybody talked to these people yet?
So the details of the proposal, Nita, like what you're talking about, can be and should be probably discussed when you guys decide it's something you want to move forward with, and that can be done through a negotiation process. So that would probably be the way to handle some of those requests that they have in their proposal.
Right. All right. And so, but if we're thinking about how much they would add to us, we could figure out what the results would be for us in the near term from this. Is that correct? Do you feel that would be correct?
Not really following what you're saying. Are you asking about what they're going to bring financially?
Yes.
Yeah, so that they have a proposal in here of what they're proposing financially, and
Right.
like I had said at the begin, when I mentioned about trying to have both us and the school repurposing group represented, and that's why I really like Gary, because Gary has a lot of experience with this kind of stuff, as you know, I think, Nita, and he was agreeable to kind of help it out, and he'd been, actually even before the group was formed, kind of very helpful in understanding, square footage rental opportunities and things like that. So,
Okay. Well, I guess without thinking it through more, that we could take the next step and see if it figures out that it would be good for us and good for them. That's my concern, honestly. And what kinds of schooling are they doing? I mean, it sounds very positive. Does anybody know much about the schools and so forth? I mean, they're going to be in the center of our town. That's why I'm asking.
I'm familiar with them, but I mean, I know at least one is on, possibly both of them are on the line. So I don't know if you want to, maybe Bob, if you want to ask questions first, and then if you want to hear from the proposers, that's up to you guys.
That would be great.
Bob, what's your?
Yeah, so let's say ask questions and then have the attorney and the proposers or anyone step in if they have any insight into answering some of these questions. So Anita approaches basically between the town being the landlord and the tenant, and that's how her questions were approached. I'm going to be approaching it more from a point of view, from the town's point of view. So I'm just going to rattle off some questions. I don't expect answers on them as I recite them, but then as we talk about it, I'd like to have answers on these questions. Our first question is, Mike, are you anticipating a vote on this evening? And if the vote was no, would the project be done, or would there be more talk, more negotiation to move down the line and do it again?
My understanding from the bidders is that, and I think it was kind of articulated in their proposals, is that they are trying to utilize the space for the fall. So if there's much of a delay on moving it forward, I'm not sure that they would continue to have interest, or they may look to other communities for space, because I know there's been other communities that have been looked at. So as far as, that's up to you guys, how you guys want to proceed. As I said, I won't be part of it. However, the opportunity to take it to the next level exists tonight, to go in, to move a motion to allow, as I described, and that's up to you guys, but I was and Gary and the attorneys, and you motioned to move forward to negotiate a contract with these folks. That is something I would not be opposed to seeing based on the urgency, but I think you should hear from the proposers.
So in reading the proposals, what I read was that at least one of the groups wanted to be in by the first week in October, but they wanted to be able to come into the school by the first week in September. So they would have a month to get the building going. So when they could hit the ground running on it first week in October. So that gives us, it's like August 11th. So it gives us about 3 weeks to vet out this opportunity for both for the town and for the schools. So my questions are this: what does it cost the town now? We had our schools were operating last year. What does it cost the town now to operate the middle school wing for 1 full year, start to finish? And all the expenses, whether it be utilities, landscaping, and so on. Second question is, you yourself, Mike, mentioned in school modernization meetings that it's no longer a question whether it's going to be torn down or not, because we're past that. But you mentioned that the school was unfit for schooling, and I know private schools have different parameters than public schools do. It was unfit for schooling. The building was no good. It was going to definitely come down. Now that it's not, it sounds to me like there may be some capital projects that will have to be done on this building down the road. which would be a cost to the town. Next is what's the extent? I know in the proposals, they weren't.
Bob, before you rattle them off, I'm not going to remember them. So can I answer a couple as we go
Go
along?
ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
I'm just not going to remember
That's
everything
fine.
you think.
That's fine.
So the comments about the school, we all had said, let me back up. I was the volunteer chair of the modernization committee. I was relying on the information given to me from the prior selectmen as far as the condition of that building. So you have to remember, I kind of came in and was working at the direction of the tri-board and then using information that had been passed along. Now, there's no question that there would have been more serious remediations necessary for a public school because there are criteria that the public schools have to adhere to. But, you know, in looking at the building, certainly there's repairs that need to be done, but it's suitable. And I don't think these organizations would have bid on it if they didn't think it was suitable for them. As far as the costs, I know Christine has received a couple of bills recently, and we have numbers as far as how much, you know, the Board of Ed has provided us some numbers about how much it costs to operate the building. But that particular wing, I'm not sure that we actually have it broken down to that point. I don't know, Christine, if you want to weigh in on that question before Bob moves on.
Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of math right now. We had posted with this RFP record that we received from the school for the gas bill and the electric bill. But I only have it because of the transition time with the new school opening, I only have it for a 10-month period, not a 12-month period. So if you just give me a minute, I'll add these all up. And then as far as landscaping and those costs, I don't have details on that. We would be having our town crew, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the town assuming the operations of that building, we'd be having the town crew do that. So that's, you know, staff we already have, but hours that they're taking away from other areas that they'd be working within the town.
Yeah, we had already budgeted and planned for the town to take over the landscaping maintenance of that building this year. We knew this building was coming to us this year, so that was not an unknown. But it is more, certainly, you know, a little bit more time they're going to have to put into maintaining a building. That was happening regardless, even with the Board of Ed going in there. That was part of the agreement. So while Christine's calculating, Bob, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just didn't want to not answer your questions.
So I guess once we get all the numbers, the idea is when we negotiate the contract with the tenants, it'd be good to have the numbers so the people doing the negotiating know what it will take to, if not make money, at least break even with the building in lieu of it not coming down.
Well, Bob, both of the proposals said that they would cover all of the utilities. So
I knew that, yeah. But there's going to be, as you said, exterior maintenance, exterior landscaping. There's a dividing wall that has to go up. There's a security door that has to go in. And there may be capital projects down the road that associate with this, because this is the older of the two wings. Which brings me to my next question. I know Mike touched on it. I talked to the chairman of the Board of Ed today, and as of right now, the high school wing is not part of their proposal, what they plan to do going into the fall. With that said, and that's a much newer building with a lot less repair, why wouldn't we have these same bidders look at the possibility of using that building, which is separated by 2 floors? You'd have the first and the second floor, which is automatically a divide, and look at using that building. The original plan, back when the building plan started, was to take down the middle school and rent out the high school. But now we're renting out the middle school, trying to lease out the middle school, but now we could have a vacant 2-story building sitting there doing nothing, which is the high school portion, which is a newer building, which would be a shame to see that go into disrepair. So I guess
try to answer that question, Bob. I mean, I can't speak for the bidders, but I know enough about this type of stuff to tell you the appeal of the building that is being proposed on is the fact that it's got a drop off, it's got a cafeteria, it's got a lot of the things that the other wing doesn't have. So they wouldn't have been interested in the other wing because they have plans for those spaces. So this was a more appealing space anyways for them. which is why they bid on it. But that doesn't mean that there's, you know, if the Board of Ed, and she's telling, this is the first I've heard of a definitive answer on that space. So certainly I think that would be the next project for us to look at, because I agree with you. We don't want to have a building fall into disrepair or be vacant. So.
And you just mentioned the cafeteria. So who, the town would be the landlord if we move forward with this, correct? Who would be the spokesman of the landlord? Would it be Christine being the business finance director? Or, I mean, who's going to negotiate if they use, are they both schools using the cafeteria? How is the restrooms going to be used? Is there shared spots in the building that are going to be used? And how will that be handled? If there's an issue, who do they go to? Who's our point person as far as the town being a landlord?
So Bob, in their proposals, I think we're pretty clear that they're not sharing the space. That dividing wall is separating the Connecticut Coastal Academy from the other school. So they've figured all that out in advance, which is why they would have that dividing wall. It doesn't look like there is any shared space within their proposals. So once the lease is negotiated, which, as Mike said, would be one of the selectmen and Gary and Nino. I mean, I interface with the fire company with issues, not that we have issues, but with anything that comes up with the Center for Emergency Services. So I think it would be the same type of scenario that I would work within the terms of the lease.
As it is right now, one of the two schools does not have to have a cafeteria, correct? If they're not going to use it and the dividing wall cuts it off from one of the tenants, then they have no cafeteria. I assume they both have restrooms.
I think it would behoove us to hear from, you know, the folks who are going to actually rent it on that question, Bob. But the other thing is, in the negotiation process, and actually some of the proposal was pretty clear too about, like, all these expenses that are, and I'm concerned about all the same things you are, and I appreciate you bringing them all up. Is that, you know, that's all part of the negotiation. You know, we can talk, that can all be talked about in the negotiation of the lease and all ironed out, so that all of these questions that you're bringing up are excellent and will and should be negotiated as part of the lease process. And of course, the town attorney is on the line hearing all of your feedback as well.
So do you feel, Mike, that this is something that the selectmen will then, you're saying you want the selectmen to vote to let the negotiators negotiate a contract and then put that contract into place, or bring that back to the selectmen for a vote?
I think that there's enough information here, and working with either of the two of you, I have the utmost confidence, especially with Gary being involved, that, you know, just like any other contract process we would have, like you would empower, normally you empower the first selectman to go into negotiations on the contract and ultimately execute the contract. So I wouldn't bring it back to the selectmen for any reason. I mean, you could, it just could potentially prolong things, or we have an extra meeting if that's something that's important. And if you're potentially not the one that's in there, Bob, and it's really important to you, we can have an extra meeting if there's an urgency to it. That's no problem.
So I guess, because my question would be then, if I'm approving tonight to allow it to move forward, then I'm actually approving the process, which in turn I'm approving the final negotiation without seeing the final negotiation. And I don't know if it's something that's as important to the town as this, if that should be done. I think the selectmen, if not the whole town, at least the selectmen should get another look at it prior to voting on it at the finished product. But anyway, I'd like to hear the committee speak and anyone else that speaks at this point. So.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in for a second, for I believe 2 more steps, and I apologize because every town obviously is different, but I do raise the question here that I would agree with the board that if we engage in negotiations as quickly as possible, obviously hearing the timeline tonight with the proposers, but 2 things. I mean, I think I would like to think that given Zoom and special meetings, we would be bringing back to the board the final contract for their approval, given that right now, there's lots of questions and we'll hear more from them. The second step that I'm interested in, certainly as town attorney, is, and this applies to, trying to think up in North Stonington, right? So you have the property that you've leased out right now for the restaurant. I'm pretty sure, right, that you'd have to take, when a third party is going to take over space in a town building, that you'd have to have a town meeting to approve that third party lease because it involves real estate of the town.
Rob, I don't
Go
think
ahead.
so, because it's not the sale of property, it's just the lease of the property. I don't think we had to do that with leasing out the Center for Emergency Services to the fire company. So I don't think.
Yeah,
that
doesn't apply. We've kind of asked that question before, and I know we went through that process, but I mean, bringing it back to the selectmen is certainly completely doable.
Yeah, I certainly would recommend that. And again, I'm just making a distinction that the statutes do talk about leasing out of any town property. There are steps under the statute that every town has to follow. It may not be a town meeting step, but it's got sort of a quirky little step that we have to look at. But we'll be looking at that. But I do recommend at least that the negotiations would continue and we bring back the lease to the board. Thank you.
Bob, I have the utilities costs. So for 10 months, the gas on the middle school is about $15,500. And the electric for 10 months for the middle school wing is $36,000.
Thank you.
And that was, keeping it at the level that the school had it at for operating, not necessarily if we took it over and turned down temperatures and stuff.
I noticed, Bob, you'd called to hear from, I don't know if Cassidy is on the line, but I know Pam is on the line, and maybe she'll recognize if Cassidy's phone number is listed here. So Pam, if I could bring you in to fill in any blanks here, answer any questions. And Pam is the executive director for Connecticut Coastal Academy. So let me bring you in, Pam. If you want to add anything.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Okay. So, hello everyone, and thank you for some really good questions. And obviously this is something that we've been looking at. We've been asked to expand our school. We started about a year ago in Essex. So we worked with the town of Essex to build out a 10,000 square foot building. We did that in conjunction with the Department of Education to make sure that we complied with all of the regulations required of private schools. So I am extremely familiar with the private school regulations, obviously, along with the public school regulations. They are different in the expectations and regulations and the procedures for inspections and all of that is very distinctly different, but there are, when it comes to health and safety, they're very similar. So we have some leniency with regard to the PCB issues, which we are planning on addressing with the administrative offices of the state to see if we can work with them to include any remediation for any hazmat materials going forward, which is why we structured our lease proposal in 3-year increments to give us time to really vet that, have the conversations with the state, see how we can provide a benefit to the town at no cost to the taxpayers, and really incorporate any capital improvement expenses within our own budgets. So I can speak for Connecticut Coastal, that's our intent. We could do this, frankly, with any town, as we did with Essex. Why not North Stonington? The space is available, and I'd love to provide that benefit to the town. So that was kind of why we decided to go forward in North Stonington. Honestly, I'm a little hesitant to just because of the political climate. I just want to make sure that everyone's on board and supportive. I don't want this to be a divisive vote at all. I want everybody to understand that we do serve a population of the students. They are public school students, who require specialized instruction and services, and that is the nature of our program. Anita, I know that you had asked about, well, what are our programs? We do not accept any students who require any kind of restraint, seclusion. We're not a behavior program. We are a truly alternative program. So we focus on teaching students hands-on trades and give them vocational experiences that will really provide them the best opportunity to be as independent as possible when they graduate. So whether that's going on to college, going into a trade, going into the military, whatever it is, that's what our focus is. So it's really kind of those kids that, I hate to say it, but they have special education needs, but they tend to fall between the cracks in our public school system. Those are the kids that we really meet the needs for. As far as the use of space, one of the benefits to working with Lighthouse is that they deal with a very different population than we do. So their students require more intensive, more occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language therapy, assistive technology. So they have a more significantly impaired population, very different than our folks and our students. So we do go through age till their 22nd birthday, and Lighthouse actually provides adult services to their clients and their client base as well. So it's a very different population, but we did see a great opportunity to do some shared services. Obviously, to run programs like that, it's very expensive. So looking at it from an administrative standpoint, Cassidy and I said, how could we really look at the professionals that we employ, clinical psychologists, like I said, occupational and physical therapists, and really maximize the benefit to both organizations. So that's how we're looking to share services. The space is obviously going to be different because the population of students is very different. So we looked at, there's more of a need for a more traditional school for our students, which is why we said, if we could do without the multi-purpose room and the cafeteria space, but I know that the town is looking to rent out that space. We will figure out a use for that facility piece, whereas Lighthouse does not require that. They teach their life skills program through their lunch program. So they would be outfitting their side of the building and their sections of the building to accommodate that within their programming. But I didn't want that to, be a roadblock for moving forward with this, because I do think it's a great opportunity for the town. So we will incur that square footage cost. As far as I'm looking at the cost to the town. So one of the things, and I had mentioned it earlier, that I really do want to look at is private schools who are state approved private special education schools. They do have the opportunity to do capital grant or capital improvement grant projects as well. So that's what we want to investigate next year with the state. How can we look at the facility in North Stonington and see where we can go through a similar process to access those funds, which obviously the cost benefit to the town would be that we would improve the facility at no cost to the taxpayers. So it's an 85% reimbursement rate, whereas the project that we worked on was a 46% reimbursement rate. So that 15% cost would be shared between Connecticut Coastal and Lighthouse. And really the only ask of the town would be your support in holding the bonds, but the cost of that project would be incurred by our organization. So I do think that there's a way to really give back a significant benefit to the town and specifically to that property. I'm looking at, Bob, your last question. Yes, the other thing that we did put in both proposals is that we fully expect to pay our fair share, whatever square footage we're using. Like with any lease, like we do in Essex, we do the triple net. So there are some shared costs that we incur with the two other tenants that are in our building. We have 90% of the space, so we incur 90% of the cost of those triple net expenses. We have our own separate utilities, which may not be possible in the space we're in. But again, that I think would be something that we would work with Gary, if that's who is appointed, but we would work out, obviously we would pay for the use of whatever square footage utility costs were involved. So Connecticut Coastal was not looking for the town to put out any capital expenses in what we need, because we can make do with what we need for our population. Obviously, we need to move quickly because we did submit our reopening plan to the state. And we are able to, with this proposal going forward, and if not here in North Stonington, it will be in another town. We are able to go back 100% in social distance and keep our students safe, which is a huge benefit, because one of the major focuses of our program is social emotional learning, which we know has been significantly impacted by distance learning. So we are looking to open as soon as possible more space, and that's kind of the urgency for it. So I appreciate the consideration. I don't know if Cassidy is on the line or if there's anything additional he'd like to add.
Do you know what the last number, do you know what his last 4 digits of his phone number are, Pam?
Let me look, hold on. $9093.
Yeah, I don't see him on here, but I mean, he may not have been aware of the meeting, so it's certainly no slight on him. He wasn't notified or anything like that.
No, and we had prepared a presentation, but we didn't know how formal this was going to be. We tried to answer and respond to the RFP as best we could, but didn't know what this process was going to look like. It was a little bit clearer in other towns, not so clear here. So we figured we would send one of us to kind of vet any questions or answer any questions that you might have.
Do the selectmen have any questions, further questions on before other comments?
No.
No? Okay. Pam, I'll leave you on if that's okay, in case there's any public that that has a question we might not be able to answer. That's all right with the selectmen, and I'll open it up for public comment and just remind the public. Try to keep our comments to 2 minutes, and then we may not have all the answers. We'll do our best. I do see a hand up, last digits 0878. I don't know if that was, it's been up for a while, so not sure if you meant to have it up or not, but you are live if you have a comment. Just let us know who you are and what your question
Hey,
is.
it's Gary Nino. I just keep changing.
Oh.
I keep changing phone numbers so you can never track me, Mike.
That's your burner phone? Okay.
Yeah, I'll throw this phone out when this call is over and get a new one. Sorry. Yeah. So, listening to what was said so far, we have one response to the RFP, but no, the RFP was for 26,000 square feet and a single tenant, but we have 2 tenants willing to share the space. So I'm not really sure why we would engage with 2 rental agreements rather than let Coastal and Lighthouse create their own partnership and do it once. The last thing we want to do is be a landlord between 2 disgruntled tenants. Hopefully it never gets there, which is something to consider. I like Bob's comment. Neither covers the full cost of the school, or we're not certain of that. The budget for that school is beyond just gas and electricity. And for almost a year, the repurposing committee was really struggling to find out what it costs to own and maintain that school. So until you have that number, you don't know what the break point is. And I think it's important that we have that before we try to renegotiate anything, because we could spend a lot of time negotiating a bad deal. It's unclear which side of the line the lavatories are on based on the discussion I've heard so far. I think there's only one set of lavatories right off the lobby on Main Street. So that's going to become a common area between the 2 schools, and that's going to become the landlords to manage, typically in a triple net lease or a similar lease like that. So, that's a bit of a prickly issue that's going to have to be wrestled with. I'm really curious, and I know Pamela, I know you toured the second story school with Dr. Nero right after the repurposing committee kicked off. I'm curious as to why the interest was there and now the interest is here. I know Mike said that due to the drop off and stuff, this is a better location, but it's not like a single story wasn't available at the time. So, I mean, we really don't need a response on that, but who is using the second story? Because the plan was, and you corrected me on this, Mike, it was to take down the single story, retain the middle section for the Board of Education, and the second story was going to be leased out, or the 2-story was going to be leased out. So if we're not going to use that approach, who's in there? Because that's a lot of square foot that the town still has to own and maintain. And trying to think, just something to consider before we vote on this tonight. We always have the time to make well thought out decisions prior to acting. We should not rush into this because of someone's timeline. This is important to the town. And I do like the town attorney's comment about, even if it doesn't go to referendum, we have a responsibility to let the townspeople know, you know, what's being thought about here. This is not something we should just do in a vacuum. Two other ones. The town crew as facility managers. You might want to rethink that, Mike, because I don't know who's going to want to get the calls in the middle of the night when the roof starts leaking, but it's going to be a little different than what our town crew is used to. And my last comment, and I've said this before, you know, the optics on this for the Board of Selectmen is going to be challenging. The one thing you didn't mention with Pamela's introduction is that she headed the School Modernization Committee, which, to no fault of hers or the committees, was the reason that the money to demolish this wing no longer exists. It had to be consumed for scope requirements in the modernization. I get that. But the optics of not having the money to demolish, going out for a lease, and the person that headed the committee that consumed the contingency or the demolition money is a lefty. That's going to be a little interesting.
So Gary, thanks for the comments. You know, I'll tell you, the crew, you'd be surprised. They are already doing a lot of things that you'd be surprised what they have to do, and they're very well capable of getting those things done and being responsible for things that, you know, maybe 10 years ago they weren't, but they are now. And I think my perspective on, you know, the optics or the town's perspective, I understand everybody has an opinion. I also understand over the last 20 years, the town is also, and I'm not going to weigh in on this, but I'm just going to tell you, I know what the town has, from what people have told me over the years, have missed out on a lot of opportunities because they have been reluctant to make a decision on things. And that goes for our schools, that goes for our emergency services, that goes for a lot of things that we could have had from an infrastructure perspective that the town didn't have to pay for. And so my perspective, or the way I've tried to do things, is, you know, trust the smart people. And that's why, you know, I reached out to you because I know you're somebody who knows a lot about this stuff, and your comments really speak to that. But trust smart people to, you know, make things happen. And let's not put ourselves in a position where because we were tentative about something, because I mean, there's always fear about any new adventure. There's no question about it, but fear can paralyze us, and then we end up with these buildings falling down, and that's not what the situation we want to be in at all. So I hear what you're saying, and I think all of the concerns you have, are certainly things that can be vetted out in a process. And, quite frankly, I think it's a great testament to North Stonington that these two wonderful organizations are considering planting roots here in our community. I think it's really great.
May I speak on that?
Sure.
I just want to, I think, Gary, that was my greatest hesitation, to be honest with you. Obviously, the challenges that we had in going through the project, and it was such a source of stress and anxiety personally that we were not able to take down the middle school wing in particular. But even looking back to, when I first started on the building committee, and Bob, you might be able to speak to this as well. My job as a committee member was to present alternative uses of that space in case we couldn't tear down that middle school wing and, you know, the high school. And one of the things that to me was extremely obvious is to offer the space to a school that I happened to start a year ago just by chance. So I picked Essex because that was, you know, the location. It was perfect, you know, considering where my kids were coming from. And it met our needs. And I did not look when I was asked by the superintendents within the region to expand from Essex. I did not want to look at North Stonington because I didn't want there to be a perceived conflict of interest. I didn't want anybody to ever think that I would do anything in this town that was anything that was like remotely not above board and, you know, at all. It took some convincing to submit the RFP. And I only did that after getting another organization on board with the use of the space. I think it's a great opportunity for the town, you know, because it is such a narrow focus of how that building can be used. There are not many organizations like ours. I can tell you that the reason I'm asked to expand is because we're the only school like ours. And there is nothing like this in Eastern Connecticut. So, you know, I was extremely hesitant. I hear what you're saying, which was my concern as well. And I never want anyone to think, you know, that there was some preconceived plan or no, I understood fully from serving on the committee and now being on the Board of Ed, the financial state of the town and the situation that we're facing. And, you know, so why not North Stonington? So I just really want to be clear about that, you know, if there is any pushback on that, I will gladly withdraw because there are plenty of open school buildings around the state right now. And there are lots of towns who, you know, have offered the space for free just because they want it to be occupied, because an unoccupied building, as we know, is going to, you know, be devalued over time significantly faster than, you know, anybody who's willing to go in and certainly willing to approach it with the Department of Ed on, you know, how can we bring this building, you know, up to speed and up to par at no cost to the town, you know? So I just wanted to make sure that I was really clear on that.
Thank you, Pam. I see Brett with his hand up. Hello, Brett.
Hello, how are you? Brett Mastriani. Just a few things. First off, I've mentioned this before, and I think it would be helpful that some of this information be posted on the town page as per the governor's mandates when it comes to open meeting laws, that any pertinent information that you guys have be posted 24 hours in advance. That way the public can get a look at some of this stuff, whatever's on the agenda, and move forward with that. Secondly,
I'm sorry, just to be clear, our agendas are posted well before 24 hours in accordance with the law. And this RFP has been posted for over a month on the town website for the entire town. And in fact, I actually was able to get 2 newspapers to cover this. So that's actually more coverage than we ever get. So I just want to make sure the public is aware of that.
I perfectly understand the agenda part, but it also says any materials relevant to matters on the agenda, including but not limited to materials related to specific applications, must be submitted to the agency 24 hours prior and posted on the agency website for public inspection. So it's something we all have to do better on all our committees, but I think especially on the selectmen's level, we should be able to, the public should be able to see this posted with the agenda of what's going on. Secondly, regarding the middle school wing rental, I believe that this should go out to either a referendum, town meeting, or referendum and a vote, because I do disagree with you and Christine that in the past, even with Bon Appetit, we actually had to go, we went through 2 separate votes on that property in regards to the lease. And with that, when we look at the referendum in the way it was written, and if you even look at any of the newspaper articles after the referendum passes, it all talks about the referendum tearing down the middle school. So the town, whether we ran out of money for that or not, the town voted on that coming down. And if we're going to change this into a lease potential, I think that really should go in front of the town And this is a, it's a perceived conflict of interest. If it doesn't, I think the cleanest way for this to proceed is to go to the town for a vote.
Thank you for your comment, Brett. Just so everyone's clear too, we couldn't, even if we wanted to go to a town meeting under executive orders, we can't actually have a town meeting. It is not required to have a town meeting for this. I know a lot of people in town love to have town meetings about everything and send everything to the people to vote. And certainly, there's certainly value to that. But if there were anything that were sent to a town meeting, actually, that would be something that would actually end up coming back before the selectmen, and the selectmen would be required to vote on it if it were going to be a town meeting situation, just for a little clarity for everyone. Josh, you just have to unmute, Josh. I'm not sure if you raised your hand purposely or
Yes.
accidentally. Yes, sir.
How's it going? Yeah, I'm a town resident. I just had a question. It seemed like during Pamela's discussion, she kind of stated she doesn't really need the cafeteria space along with her other partner there. So why wouldn't they be interested in the newer portion of the building? Because if that was like one item why we were going to go with the one-story wing, it seemed like she wasn't very interested and was just going to take it to, appease the lease.
Mike, can I address that?
You would be the only one that could.
Okay, so that the reason why was because it was not part of the RFP. So what was in the RFP was the middle school wing. It was my understanding that the high school portion of the building was not available for lease. We did inquire about it, but I think at the time that we inquired about it, it wasn't being considered for lease because we wanted to see what happened with the Board of Ed and the COVID plan and all of that. It actually meets our needs better because we do have an HBI program, which is the Home Builders Institute, and there is that workshop on the first floor. So I would be very interested in looking at that space, and if it's open for discussion, then I think it would make sense.
Great. It is full of stuff right now, so I don't know, the time frame on that, but certainly open for further discussion. Looks like Brian has a hand up. Brian, if that's Brian Rathman, I'm guessing you're excited about the possibility for more revenue for the town. Brian?
I'm interested. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear your awesome comment.
I'm always interested in revenue for the town.
All right.
We could have a lot of revenue for the town if we got to vote on our Board of Finance budget. Now you want us to, all of a sudden you're talking, well, not all of a sudden, you've been talking about this a long time, but I agree with Brett. We got to have facts and figures for all the townspeople to vote on. We haven't even got to number 4 here about the demolition proposals. I think the condition of the schools was one of the reasons that we built the new schools, because it was pushed by the superintendent and the Board of Education. I kind of take back about got to trust the smart people, because even the people that aren't so smart come up with some great ideas. I think there's got to be more in-depth discussion about taking on this deal. I really don't want to see anybody
7 o'clock.
push anything forward until the townspeople have really had a chance to look at this whole thing. I do not believe it's not going to cost our town anything. Everything that's been done in this town has cost me some money, and it hasn't always been the exact figures that everybody says. My taxes went up quite a lot, and I'm not very happy about that. But I really do believe, I mean, I guess they're voting today over at the school, but we can't have a vote on what happens in our own town. So I'm going to be very adamant on, I think people in power ought to push the governor to say, look, you're sending kids back to school. You're sending people out there to vote in a primary. It probably doesn't mean much. but we can't vote on something that's going to affect our everyday lives. So anyways, yeah, I'm excited about trying to save money.
Thank you, Brian.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
your comment. DJ.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on, having sat on the repurposing committee, I guess following up on what Gary said and Bob brought up. I would just urge you guys to really understand the true maintenance costs for that building and the different portions. So, understanding like what percentage the Board of Ed's going to take up and what, that's still obviously a town cost, but what the breakdown would be on these different areas. So understanding what percentage of the building, because I think the lease does say that, they're going to share a portion of it. So, the town's obviously going to want to know like what is the cost, to the town in the end. And I would just urge you guys to really like have a budget for capital improvement. I mean, there's going to be problems on this building. We identified plenty of them on our committee. It'd be naive to go in without, a healthy budget, knowing that there's going to be problems on the exterior, the parking lot, elevator service. So I think you guys should really have a detailed, overall, document on this that really gets, compared with, what the rental costs are going to be. And if it's a longer term lease, just making sure, that, demolition of this wing is not a regret in 3 years, that, we don't bleed out money over 3 years because we're signed onto a lease. And then we, realize that, we're paying so much per year still on top of it that we say, I know what we should have really pushed the high school wing, for rental and look to demolish the, the 1-story wing.
I think that's what the negotiation, DJ, is going to be all about, is to make sure that the costs are not the burden for the town. So, not to talk about negotiations in this meeting, if that's what you got, if the board elects to move forward, but that's the point of that, is to make sure that the town's interests are, aligned with what they need to be, and that we get a partner in the community that makes sense. So, thank you. Joe G. Joe
I'm
Gross.
unmuted.
Yes.
Okay. My comments basically is I'm getting more confused as we go on. We have two parcels over there, and I believe the high school part that we are talking about leasing is with the 2 floors on them, that part. In the middle school, we're talking about the demolition is the part that the wing comes over where we have the half circle parking thing in that cafeteria in there. Am I correct on that?
That's the middle school portion that's being talked about. Yes, on the off of Main Street.
Okay, then I go with it. The only question I have in there, and I don't know if it's ever been corrected, is there was a lot of windows that had to be replaced, and we have one central flow of no zone heating into each room there. And I wonder if we're going to have to pick that up before they take it and use it. Right now, it depends on whether the sun's setting or rising as to how the kids in the classroom dress. But that was one major portion in there, is no zone heating into each room.
They indicated that they would be putting in an HVAC system if necessary at their cost. So that is not a town. Again, we're very clear in the RFP that we were looking for partners that were going to pick up the costs of the building. Like, we're not looking to have any costs associated with this building. So that was the hope. And I think the possibility of having a tenant that met our needs, especially with the education piece, was not looking necessarily like the most possible thing. So to get a couple was,
No, I'm not looking at the negative part of that. I don't know the depth of what you guys are into, so I'm sure you know a lot more than me. It just that one little thing that I knew was in there in the past.
Yeah.
But,
thank you.
getting it and putting it out to the right people, I have no objection to.
Thank you,
Take
Joe.
it that way. I'm not negative on this. I'm not seeing everything that you guys see. And if they're buying and they're going to make all the corrections in there, God, that's like having sprinkles on your ice cream cone. Just couldn't ask for anything better. That's just unbelievable. No problem.
Thank you, Joe. I see Brett, you have another comment?
Yeah, just two things. When do you see the executive order expiring? Don't they last for a certain amount of time and then expire? And then the only one that I found that was relevant to not holding town meetings was suspension of annual town meeting or referendum to adopt a budget. I didn't see one regarding things like that. And then I have a follow-up question for, I'll ask all three at once. One's for the town attorney. If it is required for the bonding to be done through the town, wouldn't that be something that also would have to go through a town meeting?
I'll answer that question. Yes, that is true. If there's bonding required for any purpose, and I think what Pam described was the opportunity to potentially go for bonding, with them being the ones on the hook for the actual cost of it, that would definitely have to go through town meeting. But the executive orders, I think, expire in September. However, the likelihood of the executive orders being extended definitely exists. COVID hasn't gone yet. So I would see a scenario where the executive orders continue, although I would certainly advocate, and actually was a huge advocate for being able to come up with a creative way to have town meetings, especially votes. And I advocated heavily for this in opposition of CCM and a lot of other places to try to get, I will continue to do that because I think it is important to be able to do that kind of thing. But the reality of this situation is, and this is, I think we can end the comments there. There's no more anyway, and the selectmen can decide what they want to do. But the reality is there's an opportunity here. And if we don't do something like this, we're going to go on to the next agenda item. And the other side of this is that something has to be done, and then there's costs, and they're pretty significant costs that also would then have to go to a town meeting. So if we look to do a demo on the building, that has to go to a town meeting, and that could fail at a town meeting, and then we're left with a building standing there that we don't know what we're going to do with. So these are the things that have to be discussed. I leave it up to you, Bob and Nita. I think I tried to describe how I saw this moving forward and what my recommendation was, but it's up to you guys how you want to proceed.
Can I just finish my?
Right. I have an answer for you on which executive order. It's 7JJ from May 6th.
7JJ, is that the one regarding a time, if it's a timed response?
Critical and time-sensitive municipal decisions. I would say this is time-sensitive, so.
Because the people bidding on the property are making it time sensitive? Is that what you're telling me?
We're not going to get into a debate. What's your other question, Brett?
I think if just what you said, if it had to go to a town vote to approve a referendum to spend the extra money to knock it down, why wouldn't we just give the town the choice at that point and really hear from the people? And my question for the town attorney is, how are petitions handled now calling for specific votes during this?
That's not an agenda item right now, so we're not going to get into that, Brett. Thank you for your comment. I want to hear from the selectmen about what they feel about this and how you want to move it forward or not.
So I would vote to move it forward, providing that after negotiations were done, it was not approved until it came back and at minimum in front of the Board of Selectmen, if not the town through a virtual town meeting. But at least back to the Board of Selectmen. I would not vote to move it forward if it's going to be decided on by a third-party meeting. Could be Nita and Gary, I'm not sure who, but it has to come back in front of us, or I'm going to vote no, not to move it forward. So.
And Mike, I would like to speak up. It was nice of you to say a lot of things, and that's true. But I'm looking at Bob and I'm saying to myself, Bob knows so much more about those schools, which I have not been in a great deal, et cetera. And if he wants to do it, it's fine by me if he's the one that's working with.
Well, I actually have a question for the town attorney. So,
Right.
Rob, obviously, I'm going to recuse myself from this anyway. And if Bob and Nita have interest, can they do this through executive sessions to go through these negotiations of this contract, and the two of them just do it?
Yep.
And then there's really no need for this back and forth. I mean, they can just be involved with Gary, you, and then the renters, and then ultimately just come out and make a vote. Would that be acceptable, Rob?
Yeah, we can take a look at that. Certainly, there's an exception under FOI for executive sessions. One of the exceptions is for real estate negotiations. I don't have it in front of me, obviously, right at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that includes leasing agreements. So we will look at that. And certainly, whatever way that the other two selectmen want to move forward, either by executive session or by designated one of the two of them, which I think Nina was inferring that Bob was familiar with the school, we can certainly reach out to one of the Board of Select persons to begin the process of reviewing the proposals to come back to the board with a lease proposal that the group wants to consider. So we can either do that by executive session with both of them, or one of them gets designated to work with Gary and my firm to review the proposal.
Go ahead, Bob.
Can we vote in executive session? We can't vote in executive session, but can we vote to bring in certain people into executive session, meaning Attorney Ovina and Gary, Anino, and so on? So the executive session wouldn't be just the two Board of Selectmen. It would be the Board of Selectmen and invited guests, correct?
Yes, if the executive executive session is possible and privileged under FOI, you specifically make motion to go into executive session and list those necessary people for that executive session. The only catch to that is, as each person completes any presentation other than usually the town attorney or the board members, then that person is released and you go down to the fewest number of people as quickly as possible within the executive session.
Yes, Bob.
Could executive session be done as, so we call a regular meeting with the intent that the entire meeting is basically executive session. So we call a regular meeting, go into executive session immediately, maybe spend an hour, 2 hours in executive session, come out and adjourn the regular meeting?
That's correct. And you make motion in the regular meeting that there is no business right now other than make a motion to go in executive session, but it's still posted as an agended meeting. Then you go in, you note the time you went in, you note the time you came out, you say there were no motions or votes taken in this session, and with no other business, you actually then end the meeting itself.
Is it possible to do a workshop as opposed to an executive session where, so I'm not anticipating somebody like a Gary Anino to come in and do a presentation. I expect him to be there to ask questions, answer questions, and so on. So, because of his expertise in the field. So he wouldn't do a presentation then leave. So how do you work that, Attorney Avina?
Well, to be honest with you, especially with something as thorough and open as been tonight in terms of both prospective tenants, I tend to lead toward open sessions unless I think there's something that's going to come in that would be determinative of price. I really don't see that at the moment. The prices are basically on the table. There is nothing being withheld by the proposers. So in fact, you could have obviously a Zoom Board of Selectmen meeting. We can go over the terms of the agreements, any changes we'd want to see in them can basically be done. And then people can come and go that way.
So the only thing I would say, Rob, is that, I think there's some unknown information that was alluded to by a couple of people already that could change even though the pricing was proposed, if there's other information that comes to light, that may end up being discussed. So, I mean, I'm all for open meetings. We've probably only used a couple of executive sessions since we've even been in office. I prefer not to.
Yep.
But this may be something that would serve the parties better, especially since it's really important to me that these parties feel, continue to feel welcome to our community, know that we care about, that they really cared a lot about being members of our community in this partnership. And sometimes meetings can be a little bit difficult, especially with some, sensitive information like this. So I just would proceed with caution on
Yeah, and
that,
I perfectly
the
agree.
approach.
And what we typically do is we would simply schedule another meeting, in which case we, obviously as your staff and with Christine, I wrote a lot of notes here, folks, and I've done a lot of these. So we can start to generate some backup and some information for you at a regular agenda meeting. But within that agenda will be a call for executive session. And there'll probably be some points that we quickly invite some folks into that executive session as part of the meeting and go over those sensitive points within the executive session. So I think you can, and you can go into executive session the minute you feel that we need to go over those issues.
So Rob, do you have if I'm hearing Bob, Anita, and we heard everything, do you have a recommended motion for their consideration as to move, if they wanted to
I
move
do.
forward?
I do. What I think you're doing really tonight, folks, is you're saying we sent an RFP out there. We've gotten some interest from that RFP. We are now moving to pursue negotiations regarding that offer from the RFP and to report back to the board the results of those further negotiations. And the only thing that Mike and I talked about was if one of the two select people could interface with me, we could at least make some progress with Gary and then report back at your next meeting, which will include in it an executive session, to both select people what that little subcommittee came up with. So it's sort of, if it's comfortable for you folks to have either one of the select people to be part of that motion, my motion would be to go ahead and pursue the negotiations regarding this RFP and report back to the Board of Selectmen. And given that the first selectman cannot be the point person, designate one of you to be that point person and see what progress we can make and then report back to the board.
So Bob, Nita, what do you think?
Well, that sounds fine to me. I would, so if I get this right, to be a subcommittee, that would be myself or Nita. It sounds like she's already asked me to do it. With the attorney Avina and Gary Anino to kind of really vet out some of the questions that came up tonight and come up with some hard costs and expenses. And then once we were able to, because that seems to be the biggest question. I noticed DJ asked it, Gary asked it, I asked it. What's it going to cost the town, and what are the tenants going to pay for? I know you mentioned something about HVAC, but I read it after you mentioned it, and it sounds like it's still in the hands of the landlord, not the tenant. They'll maintain it, but it's up to us to put it in if it's not there, and then fix it if it breaks. But just regular maintenance they do. So there's a lot of open questions like that I would like to get ironed out. Once that happened, then we could go back to the Board of Selectmen meeting, go into executive session with Nita and whoever else we invite, probably Christine, whoever else got invited in, and then maybe make a decision in executive session, come out and vote on it. So it sounds fine to me. We just have to pick a night that, I guess, for myself and Attorney Wiener and Gary, that we can get together and start handling things out.
So are you making the motion that Gary, Rob suggested?
I think he didn't do a direct motion, I believe. It sounded like he offered some thoughts, but if you want to make a direct motion, I would be glad to second it. And we haven't asked Gary and Nino if he wants to be part of the subcommittee either, have you? So
I did ask Gary. I called Tula today to talk because we had mentioned in the RFP about their committee, and called Tula and asked if what her thoughts were about having somebody represent this from the committee, and she and I both agreed Gary would be great. And I did call Gary, and he did confirm that he would be willing to serve. So.
will we be able to use Christine's talents on set? These would have to be obviously virtual meetings, right? So can we use Christine's talents to organize this, set this up, and have, so we have identification numbers to get into the meeting, because I don't have the expertise how to do that, so.
Yes, I can be your facilitator.
Perfect.
Great. Rob, is a motion required, or is that even necessary? I mean, it probably would be give some. I think a motion would be helpful, especially to these potential tenants who I think are probably hanging on the expectation of this a little bit as they put their plans together, to know that there's some level of a commitment of at least attempting to move forward.
Mike, wouldn't the tenants also have to be in that subcommittee meeting?
No, actually, we can, what I would propose is that I can reach out to them and sort of report back and forth with Christine's help as staff. So we're staffing you folks to be the interplay with the proposer. So I think the motion is in order. If Nina's comfortable with a motion and a second to create the group moving forward, to have Bob and Gary be the two people that are that the motion is asking to meet with the town attorney, and of course we working with Christine, but with Gary and Bob to meet with the town attorney and move forward with investigating a full lease proposal to bring back to the board.
I would second that motion if that is, oh, you can't make the motion, so I would so moved on that motion, or no, I can't, he can't make the motion, right?
Yeah, Nina moved it, and it sounds like you just seconded it.
Perfect.
There you go.
That's what I heard.
That's what I heard too. Is there further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? I abstain. So it's 2-0-1. All right, good. That was good conversation and good questions. So we look forward to seeing how that goes. Pam, thank you for taking the time to be here. And I see a blue hand up here.
I think it might be Gary's phone number.
Oh, Gary. Yes. Sorry,
I just have one request. If Christine could get us a true budget build for the old high school, even if it's for the whole high school, we can break it out by pro rata share of the square foot and come up with the true operating cost of that wing. But
Gary, I can share with you the information that I have from Board of Ed. I will work with Deb to see if there's anything that I'm missing.
Believe me, not our first rodeo on this topic. If you have what we got, it's not a budget, it's just a few numbers. So we probably going to have to talk a little bit, Christine. Yeah, I don't want to embark on this, Mike, without that foundational element, because we can't make a fiduciary decision without that.
I understand that. If what we have is not acceptable, I would suggest that Bob reach out to the Board of Ed chair in an effort to get that information. We have struggled, and the board is the school is very busy, and it is difficult at this time to get, you know what I mean? We're kind of treading in some difficult waters right now. So I think if Bob would, and I know you have a relationship with Christine Wagner, so maybe you guys can try to figure that out, Bob. Because we've had
I'd be more than happy to. I can talk to Christine. I'll let her get through. She's got a meeting tomorrow night, so I'll let her get through that, and then we'll go after that. But I will reach out to her and see between her and Deb if we can get the. The school was in operation last year, so they must have last year's numbers. So
yeah, and I appreciate everybody's efforts and just working expeditiously on resolution on this for everyone's sake. Certainly not trying to rush anything. I know it seems like that sometimes, but when opportunity comes before us, we have to be ready to react in one way or the other. So thank you, Gary. And let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the demolition proposals. So obviously we've moved into the idea of trying to see if we can put a tenant in this building, but we did also get the demolition proposals, and I think it would be just good for at least the benefit of the public to understand where the bids came in, and then depending on where the talks go with this, we can certainly take this up at a future meeting if this is a direction we're going to pursue. But just for the benefit of the public, we had 4 bidders who were at the mandatory walkthrough. The bids ranged from $873,795 to $1,029,323. So those bids would have to be vetted to just make sure they encompass everything. But that was the initial numbers. The bids just came in yesterday, so there hasn't been a full vetting of any of these bids yet. But that's where the initial numbers look like they came in. So do the selectmen have any comments or questions about the bids or anything?
Well, only, Mike, that you didn't go to the highest one at all, the 1,344,000.
Did I miss that?
Yeah, you did. It's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I look at the wrong?
Yeah, I think you're not maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, my apology. I was looking at the sheet incorrectly. Thank you, Nita.
It's okay.
So it went from 873 to 1.3 million. So my apologies. Yes, Bob.
So my only comment is, like you said, Mike, we just got these yesterday, printed it out this morning, and then I haven't really had a lot of time to go through it, although I did notice that in the low bid, I started with the low bid and worked my way up, but I would still need more time to go through these with a fine tooth comb. But what we know, when you take down a portion of a building that's there, that leaves an opening in the building that's staying. I didn't see any provision in that demo to rebuild a wall to close in the open wall that's now there because you took down part of a building. At least in the second bid I looked at, the second highest bid, there was a provision in there to replace a wall and put a door in and possible windows. So there was an expense covered in doing that. You can't just take a building down and walk away and leave the existing building with a big hole in it. So I'll look at it again, but I did not see a provision for that. So those are the kind of things you need to look for to make sure that it's all apples for apples. Everybody's doing the same thing. So, and you would need more time, this being that we just got, and you said this yourself, we just got these yesterday. So, but I'm glad we have them anyway. So it gives us a place to start.
Yeah, Bob, we did have the reconstruction of the wall as part of the scope of work. So I also did not go all the way through the bids. So they might have just included it just in their verbiage of scope of work, since we had talked about that on the walkthrough.
And that could be. I just didn't see it in that one bid. So
we'll see if we look at these at a future meeting, depending on how things proceed. Is there any comments, public comment on the bids we just mentioned?
No.
Okay. Oh, I do see a hand go up. Joe Gross.
All right, I'm unmuted. I just wanted to let you know I'm totally confused now. But what I'm going to do, I got to leave your meeting, and I'm going to ask Chris, if I visit you tomorrow, could you unconfuse me like you normally do?
Absolutely, Joe. Come on down.
All right. And Bob, you keep asking your questions, and God give you board some help somehow getting out of this. But I know you guys are putting in a hell of a lot of work here. I'm going to leave you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And appreciate the comment. And Rob, if you're all set as far as your involvement, so you can go back to being on vacation if you want. Appreciate you being here. There you go. We'll punch him out. Okay, and then agenda item number 5, the update on the equity and inclusion virtual conversation. So the selectmen discussed last meeting that we felt there needed to be more conversation on this topic. And so with a little bit more thought, we have successfully put together this discussion with a facilitator who is from the town, who's really going to take the lead on it. So what I have done is to make this happen with the help of others, specifically Bob, helping to get a couple of panelists. Very appreciative for Bob's help on that. And then getting some information that will go into the conversation to help kind of fuel some discussions about inclusion and equality. And so this will be facilitated. This will start next Monday at 7 o'clock. And it'll be a panel discussion where, in fact, it's already on the Facebook page, but I'm going to send out a news blast tomorrow about it, and people can submit their questions. And certainly it'll be good because it'll be a panel discussion of community members to just have some honest discussion about these topics, and hopefully have just a better understanding of one another at the end of them. So we're very excited about this. It's not going to be, facilitated by the Board of Selectmen or anything like that. Certainly, anyone who's welcome, is interested, is welcome to come. And we would encourage anyone to come to this virtual conversation, depending on, whatever their beliefs are, whatever their thoughts are, wherever they kind of fall on these issues. This is an open dialogue for our community to talk. So we're excited about it, and it'll happen at 7 o'clock next Monday, and then we'll see from there where we go. So if there may be some follow-up virtual conversations about this topic as well. We'll kind of try to get some feedback on where we think we need to go after the first one.
Okay, Mike, so originally you were saying that you wanted us to be involved in this too, but you don't think we should be at this point.
I think as participants, Nita, and I apologize because this is something that I had thoughts about, and I think they kind of they developed as I talked to the person who was going to facilitate it, because she has more experience than I do. And to me, it was just an idea. And so I don't see us being leaders in this conversation, more as listeners in the conversation.
Okay.
So, I mean, I will certainly attend, and I know you will attend. And I think we just need to listen and see where, where the conversation goes and where the opportunities are for us.
Okay, I that's fine. And so if we know of other people who are interested in this too, has she already picked some people to be on a committee, like a conversational committee, or not? Yeah, so it's a panelist approach. So there are people who have volunteered to be panelists for the first one. Okay.
I don't have all the answers about where this goes, and I don't intend to drive the ship in any way.
Okay.
I think the possibility exists that there may be a future one after this, some follow-up ones, depending on where it goes, where more panelists may want to get involved. I guess without knowing where it goes, I guess my hope for it is that we become more understanding of one another, that this opens up a greater dialogue in so many different areas in our town to really just talk about this, to talk about these issues, to be able to have these honest conversations. And so I don't have all the answers, but I think the first one will hopefully be kind of a nice trendsetter for us to get things going in the right direction. So.
And how will it be posted?
So the Zoom link already exists, so folks can get on just like they got onto our meeting, and they can log on either on the computer or they can call up just like on our meeting. I have already put it on the Facebook, and then I might try to get a press release about it. We're trying to encourage North Stonington people, I mean, really we want it to be about our community to come to this. And then, so those are the ways that it would probably be publicized. I don't know any other ways besides that.
So it's not going to come out of our website that we use. I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
we'll do
so
it.
Nita, we're gonna put it on the event calendar like we do all of our meetings. So the Zoom information will be in that event link just like it is for this meeting. But we'll also, Mike's gonna do a news blast tomorrow that'll go out through our news and announcements that we do. And when he's saying panelists and those things, it's gonna be this type of a webinar setup like we use for the Board of Selectmen meetings, where there's specific people that have the panelist link, and then that's who people will see speaking, and then everyone else will be an attendee and they can talk just like we do questions on this. So just for the nuts and bolts of how it's going to work, it'll be similar to how we run our meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Bob.
Question for Christine. So Christine, I know there was talk that we want this to be a North Stonington conversation. Is there a way to limit it to North Stonington and not have outsiders come into the conversation?
There really isn't. I don't know how much other people will see the information since we're going to publicize it through our pages and our means. But there really, I can look into it, but I really don't know that there's a way to, just because Zoom is such a public platform, I don't know that there's a way to limit it.
It just seems like it could be easily disrupted by someone on either side of an issue that's far one way or far the other way, as we saw, recently in the protest. So you can get these people that disrupt a meeting, and then I guess it's up to the facilitator to bring the meeting back at that point, correct?
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of the webinar version, is that it's not that people can just unmute themselves and start talking. The facilitators have full control over who can talk. You can mute them and disable their functionality to talk. You can kick them out of the meeting altogether. Right. So thankfully we haven't had to do that at our selectmen's meetings, but it is an option.
Good. That's good to know. Thank you.
Any other comments on this?
No.
I don't see any hands up. No comments from the public. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 6. I just wanted to put these on the agenda. So obviously we had this tropical storm, which, was pretty disruptive. I don't know how long you guys were without power, but, a quarter of our town was without power, and actually got upwards of a little bit more for a while. Up until today, we actually still had people out of power. And just to let you know, obviously, the fire company, ambulance troopy, just commending those guys on the response and just the continued work. Eversource was out here. I think they had some problems, obviously, this time. The governor called it out from the very beginning, but they had issues that I haven't seen them have since, I think, prior to taking office. I remember there was a storm when Sean was in office, and there was some real problems with Eversource's systems and all that, and they had some of those problems this time. So our Eversource liaisons were very good. They're very responsive. I have to probably give a tremendous amount of credit to Gary and Joe. Donnie was actually not in for this storm, so Joe had to take the bull by the horns on this one, and Joe performed really well. And Gary is always a champion when it comes to this stuff. So Gary Barron, our emergency management director. So really a team effort. Unfortunate for those who were out of power for a long time, but I think our crews responded as best they could, and it's unfortunate. Hopefully we just are more prepared if it comes again. It's supposed to be an active hurricane season, so hopefully we don't have another issue. But yes, Bob.
Mike, just a note on this. So driving up 184, I think it was on Saturday, and I know that the little pocket park that Bill Rickard did such a nice job on. It was quite the eyesore he made it. So you're driving from 49 in, you see that it says "Welcome to North Stonington." So there's 3 vehicles, big trucks parked on that. And I was thinking, is that town property, state property? Who owns that property? And is it okay for those 3 trucks to be parked on something that, the conservation committee's worked hard to try to keep up and make it look nice? So
yeah, I saw that. So that's state property, and they were not parked on the park. They were parked in the grass in front of the park.
No,
so
they were in the park. 3 big trucks right through the park.
No, well, it depends what you classify as the park. So there's these these little light, little reflectors, and then there's grass, and then there's mulch with all the trees. They were parked in the grass in front of the park. Now, I don't know why they parked there. Could they have chosen a different place? I mean, that is state property. So, and it was a state cruise because they're doing guardrails. So I guess that was probably the closest place for them to park. Maybe they were told to park there, but there's no damage to the park. I drove by actually had a drive along yesterday with Deputy Commissioner from the DOT, Garrett Euclido, and we drove actually all around the town and drove by there as well. And the park looked to be in fine shape. I did mention it to him on the drive around, but I didn't see any issue with it. I mean, I think it didn't look good to people maybe, but there was no damage or anything like that. The grass was dry.
Thank you.
But everybody does think that the green grass is the park, incidentally.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I guess why? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of it as the mulch area, but yeah, I mean, a park is grass too, right? So
Yeah, right.
yeah, so that's right. So I understand. Okay. All right, so that's all I had on the storm at this time. Just the COVID-19, I just put this, back on there. We continue to have very good results in our area. Really no activity to really speak of right at this time. Thank goodness. I know on that same token, I know the school is working on their reopening plan. They had a meeting even tonight. I know they meet again tomorrow night. To try to come up with a good plan, a good safe plan to get everybody back. But we're doing well. I'll mention that, as you know, town hall never closed for this whole thing, but we did lock our doors to the public. And we kept that right through tax due date, and then ultimately unlocked the doors to the public after that, because we felt, the crowds are pretty much, the major crowds would be gone. So, people can now come right back in town hall like before. They have to wear a mask. We've got a sign right out front. We have all of the safety inside as we've implemented, the plastic barriers and things like that. But it's still a very warm experience coming into town hall, and it's safe for everybody as well. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments on the COVID thing. It's not on the agenda, but I'll just make a quick mention that it was in today's news that if you want one more thing on top of storms and COVID, there was a EEE pool found in Stonington. So hopefully I'll put that on the next agenda to give updates on as that. But this is not surprising. So I just am awaiting the earthquake and the tornado to follow. So. Going on, and is there any comments? I do see some hands up on, and I skipped over public comment on the storm and the COVID. So if you have comments on either of those, Brian, you have a comment?
Yeah, I didn't know what the update was on Winnebago. You still got to go around the other side?
Winnebago's clear now.
So we can go from this side then?
You can, yep.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Brett?
I'm just referring to the COVID issue and the timeline with Pam needing to hear and get into the school. Before you guys, I know you're moving forward in discussing a lease, but I have to refer the selectmen to Connecticut General Statute 7-163E, public hearing on the sale, lease, or transfer of real property owned by a municipality. And it says basically that before this happens, there need to be a public hearing on.
Right, this isn't on that topic, and the attorney will be involved, so we will have guidance from the attorney on this topic. We're not going to do anything that is illegal, just so you know. So thank you for your comment.
I'm just bringing it up because of the time frame involved, and if this is something that needs to happen so that Pam can lease that property, I think it's good for you guys to look into that as quickly as possible.
We will be working in conjunction with the town attorney. So that's why I brought the attorney on, so we're not steered wrong on anything. Thank you. Any further comments on COVID-19 or the tropical storm? Okay, next up is tax refunds.
Do you guys have any questions? I sent them out yesterday.
Yeah, just clarity on, so there's one person on here, it's on 4 times. but there's not an address. It's a PO box number. Can you just, can you tell us anything about that? I mean, it's just a PO box number and he's getting probably the most tax refund of anyone on hand, so.
So if you look at the actual pages within, not just the cover page, it has the, I don't want to say the addresses on the,
No, I get you. Yeah,
but it has the addresses right on there.
And I'll
for
be
that
honest with you,
person.
to save paper, I didn't print those. I only have the cover, so I apologize.
No, that's fine. Because I was wondering the same thing. That's why I made sure I had the papers with me so I could.
But those are
double check.
legitimate North Stonington addresses that's
Yes.
attached. Okay.
Yes.
I'll look at those. Thank you.
But it's better to save the trees and not print it if you don't need to. So.
You see these 25 and 30 page reports. It's like, oh my God. And I just
I
printed
sent you
out
guys
all
some
the-
attachments. It's just like, okay, here's a novel.
Oh, I just printed out all the bids for the bidders for the demolition. So it's like, okay. Anyway,
Was that,
I would
Where
entertain
is-
a motion then to approve all of these. Oh, is there a question? I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. You made the motion. Nita, do you want to second it?
Second,
I'm just gonna, I can't find it in my email for some reason, and it's fine. You guys, if you guys have looked it over, I'll just, you guys go ahead and make the I'll probably just abstain because I haven't looked at it, so.
okay.
Any
So-
further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'll just abstain because I didn't see it in my packet. I don't know why. It's probably, I just overlooked it. I'm sure it's not your fault, Christine. It's my fault, I'm sure. Okay, moving on. Minutes?
Looks like we have two meetings. It was just the, well, actually, it's the 5:30 meeting and the 6 o'clock meeting on the same night. So we had a Zoom meeting at July 28th at 5:30 PM, and I make a motion to approve those draft minutes as submitted by Christine.
Seconded,
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then the part two of that same evening, July 28th at 6 PM, we had a regular selectmen meeting, and I motion to approve those minutes as submitted by Christine.
Second? Further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
I,
Okay. Now, it's the end of the meeting, so motion to adjourn?
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn. I second the motion.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I.
All right, everybody. Hey, thanks. Now, we'll look forward to our next meeting. We'll meet in person at the Media Center.
And Christine, will you get in touch with both myself, the attorney, Gary, and let me know when that is? And
Yes.
if it's gonna be in the evening, I can do it on a weekend day or an evening. Just let me know which evening, so I don't, in case I have a conflict. I always have
I'll-
conflict.
Rob's on vacation until he's coming back Thursday. So we'll set it up when he gets back.
I always have conflicts on Thursday night.
Thursday,
and then
yes.
Thursday.
And,
Your summer
when I said
programming,
we'll-
I know.
When I said we'll meet in person, it's the committees can meet in person, but not the public. So we'll still have the Zoom, obviously, so people will be online. So
Okay, super.
we'll
Thank
see
you.
you. And if there's an extra meeting necessary, we'll figure that out. So, all right, thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Good night.
Hey.
Bye.